What you're about to see isn't just a Senate hearing, it's a warning shot. Senator Patty Murray just exposed how the Trump administration is quietly dismantling the Department of Education from the inside out, cutting staff, freezing funds, and leaving students behind. Watch this.
For her questions.
Thank you very much, Chair Capito. Good morning, Secretary McMahon. You know, President Trump has made clear that he wants to abolish the very department that you lead, and we know here that you cannot eliminate the Department of Education without an act of Congress. But I'm afraid that that has not stopped you from preventing the department from actually doing its job. You have indiscriminately shuttered offices and pushed out half of the department's staff, and under your leadership, we have seen critical research to improve student outcomes axed overnight, and funding for mental health services and teacher training, among a whole lot, abruptly cut off and discontinued. Now, today you come before this committee to request massive funding cuts that do, in my opinion, nothing to help improve opportunities for students in our public schools throughout the country. You are proposing to slash Pell Grants and much more. Now, you and the President say this isn't about cutting education funding, but all about, quote, returning education to the states. But actually that can be further from the truth, because the reality is this administration is actually taking unprecedented steps to extort schools and universities and hold federal funding hostage if they don't conform with your agenda. So it's pretty clear that returning education to the states actually means letting states and colleges and local communities pick up the tab. And I just don't believe that's how things should work in America. I don't believe that's good for students, and I don't believe it's good for our families. Now, having said that, Secretary McMahon, as I mentioned, you have set out to eliminate nearly half of your department's workforce, and that includes pushing out the door more than half of the staff at the Office for Civil Rights, the entire staff responsible for managing grant operations and contract procurement, and employees who actually prevent students from getting ripped off by predatory colleges. The department cannot do its basic job to execute the law, given how many staff have been pushed out, and it is our students and our teachers who will suffer the consequences. So I want to know from you, before you cut that much staff, did you conduct any analysis to assess whether or not it would degrade support and services for students in our schools, or how the department would still be able to execute the law after losing so many employees?
Certainly. Excuse me. Good morning. Thank you for that. Yes, we did talk to the department itself.
But did you do an actual analysis?
OCR. What we looked at across was how can we restructure the department so that we can maximize the use of the people who are there. So what we did was in like training manuals and things of that nature to look at it and say, okay, we can better operate if we focus on
So this was a conversation. You didn't do an actual analysis to determine what the effects of this would be?
No.
So no study was done. They were just fired and you assumed that it would work?
No, obviously not. I have been in the private sector and done restructuring before in companies, and it's painful to do restructuring. It is
painful, but normally companies look ahead and say, what are our goals and what will be the impact if these employees are gone from this department? That's why I asked, but you've not done an analysis, and my time is short, so let me continue. I know Ranking Member Baldwin talked with you about this as well. You were required by law to submit an operating plan 45 days after enactment of the full year CR, detailing exactly how you are spending funding Congress provided this year. You didn't do that. The purported operating plan that you did submit told us virtually nothing about how you are spending taxpayer dollars right now at this very moment. And that really raises concerns about when and actually if you're going to get funding that Congress did provide for FY25 out the door. For example, your FY26 budget request zeroes out dedicated funding for literacy education programs, and your operating plan for this year describes this funding as unallocated. So will you allocate the $220 million for literacy programs that Congress appropriated for FY25?
Well, Senator, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking at the unallocated dollars now to determine which of those programs we can best spend those dollars on. And I would be happy to get back to you. And we want to work with Congress on those unallocated dollars to see where they could be spent the best.
Well, what is your plan to make sure that that funding actually gets to the schools and students it was intended to support? We're running out of time here.
Well, to look at those programs and then to allocate them to the states if those programs we believe is the best interest.
Those funds
of those
were
students.
appropriated by Congress. Your department was to allocate them, and it really looks to me like the department is illegally impounding funding that would help our students succeed with plans that don't exist and just day after day going by here, and that's our concern.
Well, let us work more with you as we update those allocations, as we did before.
When do you plan to have those funds out by?
Well, the funds that we are approving will go out in this year.
Like in this next month or?
In the fiscal year.
You're running out of time, so we need to see what the plan is, if you could provide
Yes.
that. Okay. Secretary McMahon, the administration says that one of its priorities is tackling anti-Semitism in our schools. That's correct, right?
Correct.
Well, the Office of Civil Rights at your department takes the leading role in preventing anti-Semitism and enforcing our nation's civil rights law. It is really an important mission. But as you hopefully know, that office is underwater. What is the current backlog at OCR? Can you tell us that?
We inherited about a 20,000 backload from the Biden administration, but one of the things that we found is some of those cases were like one-page complaints, and we've really been able to get rid of many of them, and we are fulfilling—
So what is the—
this is important for me to finish. We absolutely are fulfilling all of our statutory requirements, have not failed to do any of those, and not only are we reducing the backload, but we are keeping up with what's coming in now with a reduced staff.
I appreciate
because we're doing it efficiently.
If you don't have the staff, you can't do them. So
no, excuse me. If you have an efficient staff that has changed programs and you are addressing all of the issues, then you are being successful. So I'm answering your question by completely answering it.
Madam Secretary, my question is, what is the current backlog?
The current backlog is probably about, let's see, I'm looking at my numbers now, about 2,500 cases.
2,500, and how many are you processing per month? Do you have any sense?
No, well, we're catching up with the backlog and keeping current on the ones that are coming in.
But you don't know how many you're processing every month. You can't tell us, so we can get an idea.
I can get back to you with that.
Would you?
Exact number? Sure.
If you could commit to giving us quarterly reports so we know whether OCR is simply dismissing these cases or doing its job. If you could give us a quarterly.
I'd be happy to do that. I can assure you it's doing its job.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
What you just witnessed wasn't just another tense Senate hearing. It was Senator Patty Murray, one of Congress's most experienced advocates for public education, sounding the alarm on something much deeper: a coordinated attempt to hollow out one of the nation's most vital institutions, the Department of Education. When Murray pressed Secretary McMahon about the mass firings, the unallocated funds, the unexplained cuts to literacy and mental health programs, she wasn't just asking bureaucratic questions, she was exposing the anatomy of a dismantling. Because what's happening here is not reform, it's erosion by design. President Trump has openly said he wants to abolish the Department of Education. But since he can't legally do that without Congress, his administration appears to be trying to strangle it from the inside. Fire the staff, freeze the grants, ignore oversight, defund research. Then tell the public the department no longer works and use that manufactured dysfunction as justification to finish the job. It's a textbook strategy for those who want to privatize or politicize what was once a public good. McMahon's responses were telling. When Murray asked whether she'd done any analysis before cutting half the department's workforce, McMahon admitted there was no actual study, just conversation. That means tens of thousands of educators, civil rights investigators, and grant administrators were shown the door without even a plan for who would do their work. The effect? Students lose services, teachers lose support, and schools lose federal protection, while the administration saves face by calling it efficiency. Then came the funding question. Murray pointed out that Congress, bipartisan majorities, not just Democrats, had allocated hundreds of millions for literacy and teacher training. Yet those funds sit idle, marked unallocated. That's not just negligence, it borders on illegal impoundment, withholding funds that Congress has already approved. In plain terms, it's the executive branch rewriting the budget on its own terms. And when McMahon tried to justify it by saying, "We're looking at which programs we believe are in the best interest," Murray cut right through it. Because that line, "we believe," reveals everything. It's no longer about what Congress voted for, what the data supports, or what students need. It's about ideology. It's about control. It's about deciding which schools, which communities, and which children deserve federal support, and which ones don't. Think about what's really at stake here. The Department of Education isn't just a bureaucratic office, it's the agency that enforces civil rights laws in schools, protects students from predatory colleges, and ensures special education and low-income funding actually reach those who need it most. When you gut that department, you don't just shrink government, you erase safeguards for millions of students who depend on them. The moral and legal implications are staggering. Imagine a student being discriminated against or denied access to an education, filing a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights, and being told their case will take years because half the staff is gone. That's not a malfunction, that's the outcome of deliberate neglect. And the most revealing part came near the end. When Murray asked McMahon for basic accountability, how many civil rights complaints are being processed each month, the secretary couldn't even answer. She didn't know. That silence speaks volumes. Because when an administration stops tracking injustice, it effectively normalizes it. This isn't just about politics, it's about values, about whether education is treated as a public right or a private privilege. Whether our government serves students and teachers, or whether it serves those looking to profit from their vulnerability. What Murray was confronting wasn't incompetence, it was ideology masquerading as management. Her line, "You can't eliminate the Department of Education without an act of Congress," is more than procedural. It's a warning. Because if the public doesn't pay attention to these quiet administrative purges, one day the department won't have to be abolished. It'll simply cease to exist in any meaningful form. And that's the danger. When we talk about small government, this is what it often means in practice: stripping away public institutions that defend equity and replacing them with systems of selective access, where only those who can afford it thrive. That's the long-term cost of this moment. Murray's exchange is a reminder that democracy isn't self-sustaining. Bureaucracy can be boring, but it's also the infrastructure of justice. And when that infrastructure is gutted, the impact doesn't show up on cable news. It shows up in classrooms, in kids who can't get reading support, in families denied college aid, in communities left behind. So yes, this is about oversight, but it's also about defending the idea that public education should serve everyone, not just the politically convenient few. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Left Lens, where we don't just replay the hearing, we decode what it means for the future of justice, governance, and accountability in America.